Mr. Giuliano, you said several times things along the line in your opening statement of no company would have to bear this. Isn't it true that a company would have to, under law, fully fund its liabilities in real cash transfers for a defined benefits program? Isn't the pension law one in which you must pay in advance every day for what you eventually will pay out for in retirement and in health care, if that's part of your benefits plan?
The big difference in this case, Congressman, is that no company that I'm aware of would be required to pay for future retiree health care.
Okay, well, maybe we'll go to Governor Miller. Isn't it true that every company that has a defined benefit plan does have to pay for future retirees, not future employees, which you said, which we'll look into, but General Motors, I can recall taking I think it was $5.5 billion hit one time by a change in accounting rules that caused them to have to recognize more into their defined benefits plan. And ultimately, by the time they went into bankruptcy, that was their greatest cost differential between themselves and the Japanese, was having to pay into these defined benefit plans. Would you like to comment on that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. To my knowledge, your characterization is accurate.
So maybe the question here today for this committee, which also oversees FERS and so on, is shouldn't every government entity have to fully recognize, at least on paper, the legacy costs they're creating today with employees who will retire in the future? Is there anyone that disagrees with at least accounting for that? I understand your concern is paying for it, but does anyone disagree with the accounting of knowing what the future costs were going to be? Well, let me ask you. Yes,
Mr. Chairman, I think you make an important point. We are a commercial enterprise, so we have a bottom line. Most government agencies are not, so it would be an accounting entry. But to have Congress and everyone else recognize that government agencies, other government agencies, have these liabilities would be a good idea.
I think that's something this committee needs to look at broadly is the truth in accounting of what our legacy costs would be. Mr. Donahoe?
If I could comment too, Mr. Chairman, I think there's a couple things we have to look at here. Number one, when you look at the entire retirement liabilities that the Postal Service has, we feel that we are overfunded into the Civil Service Retirement Fund. I know Mr. Lynch has got a bill coming up to ask the GAO and the White House to go back and look at those accounts. Somewhere between $50 and $75 billion from our estimates and two separate
Mr. Donahoe, the question for you, since the administration, I understand, has already rejected the argument, you're asking them to go back and re-look at something they've already rejected.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yes. I think it was Einstein that said that if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, that's the definition of insanity. Let me take my limited time and go on with just a couple of more things.
Mr. Chairman, if I...
No, please. There'll be plenty of time for follow-ups. But, Mr. Donahoe, you said, and Mr. Miller said, and I think Mr. Giuliano said, that this was the best you could do under existing law. Isn't it true that in binding arbitration, two provisions could not have happened? The provision for insourcing janitorial services that Mr. Guffey referred to as, outsourced at a greater cost, and I object to it being a greater cost. If it is, then we need to address that. But that could never have been achieved except through this agreement, the insourcing. That was not, in fact, a part of the collective bargaining. It became part because it was put on the table. Also, in the case of a change from a statutory approved category of people that were not eligible to be under collective bargaining to this new category who most assuredly will become eligible under collective bargaining. As I understand it, the provision that you negotiated creates an absolute requirement. If you don't join the union, you lose out on $3,000 of free benefits. So isn't it effectively that this new category of workers that was estimated to be 35,000 at the end of 1 year immediately costs us at least 3,000 more before you do a pay raise, so that by year 3, our estimation is this group will cost you more, not less. Mr. Donahoe, would you want to comment on that? Mr. Miller?
I'd like to comment on a couple of things. First of all, we set out in this agreement to achieve three basic strategies.
No, I appreciate all of that, and you'll get plenty of time on that. But one, isn't it true those two items could not have been done by mandatory arbitration. They couldn't have ordered those two changes.
In mandatory arbitration, it is a roll of the dice. We maintain.
Okay, Mr. Miller, would you disagree with that? In arbitration, could those have been on the table? They weren't part of the collective bargaining agreement. Could they have become part, essentially mandating new union employees in a new category?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not an attorney, but my understanding is that if a provision was part of the package that the union was advancing, the arbitrator could take these items and include it in the final determination.
But historically, arbitration is about the pay and benefit of those covered, not those not covered. So the likelihood, at least from the advice I'm getting, is that there were two things which increased the number of Mr. Guffey's union workers, and that is that you're substantially insourcing 4,000 people who previously were just contract employees to clean and do other janitorial work, and this category that now will most assuredly be added to the union and undoubtedly be in the next bargaining contract asking to be treated fairly and equally with their brothers. Mr. Donahoe, if you could answer briefly.
First off, it's important to note that we maintained all outsourcing provisions in the contract going forward. What we looked at in the case of the custodial employees was the financial benefit to bring the work back into the Postal Service with the newly negotiated substantially lower wage rates. We did that with everything we looked at from an insourcing standpoint. We compared costs like we do with everything. We always keep our eye on the bottom line.
Okay, and my time has expired.